Welcome back to the Everything Podcast. Gabe and I talked to Chris Cooper today. Such an awesome conversation. Chris has been in the fitness space for a really long time. He's been mentoring CrossFit gyms for years, owns gyms himself, came from a personal training background. He used to sell treadmills. He's done it all. And I love talking to Chris. I think he has a wealth of knowledge specifically for gym owners. So if you're a gym owner out there, if you're a coach out there, if you're someone who's interested in ever opening a gym, this is a phenomenal episode for you. If you're not interested in opening a gym, you're not a coach, and you just love listening to Gabe and I riff about life and fitness and whatnot, this probably isn't the best episode for you. But I love talking to Chris. Like I said, he really captures content and information from hundreds of gyms. So when we speak about sum of, he looks at it as the sum of, like a really big macro scale versus just sum of. And I think that's really important for us to gather our information for someone like him, because he doesn't have just anomalies here and there. He's looking at overall trends. So, if you're a gym owner out there, grab a pencil. He has some great sound bites. He has some great feedback. I really enjoyed this one. Sit back, relax, and let's dive into a great episode. Mr. Chris Cooper from Two Brain Mentorship Group. Let's go. Chris, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for talking to Gabe and I. We really appreciate it. You have a wealth of knowledge. You work with a bunch of different gym owners through your Two Brain. Would you call it a consulting service? Is that the best way to describe it?
Excuse me. So we call it a mentorship practice.
Mentorship practice. There you go.
Yep.
And so, Chris, I think that Gabe and I were both really interested in supporting gym owners and coaches. We want to allow for gym owners to do what they love for a living, but do it for a really long time and not build resentment for this thing that they fell in love with because, the business isn't thriving and doing as well as they wanted, and it impacts their lives in a negative way. And so I think that a really key part of this conversation is like, what do you see as major trends currently in the ecosystem? Because you've been around for a long time. I mean, I remember you and we first met in Montreal, I want to say like almost 10 years ago, wasn't it? In Montreal we met? And here we are.
Yeah, but even before then.
Was it? Okay, yeah, even before then.
Yep. So our first interaction was actually, you had just won the games and I had a business blog, and the business blog, one of the blogs was called Why You Owe Jason Khalipa $20. And it was because your win at the games and the resulting movie was going to be like an inspiration to the next generation of CrossFitters, right? And like every sport has that. When I was a kid growing up playing hockey, you would say in your head, like, I'm Wayne Gretzky coming down the ice. And CrossFit didn't have that before you. And so I wrote you a letter and sent you a blog link, and you actually sent me an autographed Rogue t-shirt that's framed in my office at the gym today, 15 years later.
Dude, that is so cool. Oh man. I mean, nobody owes me anything, but that's cool that you felt that way. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then obviously we reconnected, again, years later, talked business. At that point, we had been running 30-minute classes, 45-minute classes, 60-minute classes.
Yep.
We've tried a lot of different things here at the gym. And, Gabe has definitely incorporated some new things we're running. And I definitely want to dive into like practical application, what we're currently doing, how we've evolved, listen to you and what you see as success, and hopefully just provide some insight to gym owners. I thought a good question to start off with is, I was listening to you on the Savon podcast, and you talked about the technician's curse. And it really hit home for me, because I was just at Wadapalooza and you had several gym owners come up to me and tell me that they took over their gym only because they wanted to see the community continue. Like they just wanted to see but they had no interest in like running it like a business. It was more like a hobby. They just loved the community. Or maybe you love to coach and you're a phenomenal technician, but you don't understand the business side. So when you think about technician's curse, like what does that mean to you? And what does that mean for people thinking about who think the only path forward is opening a gym, even if all they want to do is just coach?
Well, that was me for sure. In 2005, I had been a personal trainer for about 9 years at that point, and I thought the only way I can make more money is to open a gym. And I ran a gym really poorly for a couple of years. And one of the first resources that I found was called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And he refers to the technician's curse. And this is the this mindset that we all have, that like, if I am the best in town at my thing, personal training, doing CrossFit, making muffins, then my business will be successful because everybody will recognize me as the best and everybody else will go to business. Well, that's not true. And, it took me 3 years to kind of figure out that that wasn't true, that I had to actually become a good business owner. It wasn't enough just to be a good coach.
And kind of following up on that, I think Greg was always about this idea that like product on the floor. And I think that somewhere along the way in CrossFit, it became negative to talk about running a successful business or making money. I don't know why, but did you see that too early on, where like if you talked about running a thriving business, you're like the antithesis of what CrossFit is, because you just because you're talking about running a successful business, it automatically implied that you didn't care about the product or something like that. But if you only cared about the product, there's so much more to running a business, like you were saying.
Yeah. So around before I even affiliated, I think 2007, I was on the CrossFit message boards asking about money. Like, hey, look, I'm going to open this second location. It's a big risk. I've got this personal training studio that's doing okay and feeding my family. I don't want to torpedo that by having a second location that's also a CrossFit gym. And I basically got like booed out of the comments section. Like, how dare you talk about feeding your family? And, there were times too when I would be around HQ and I was working for them as a writer, when they would bring people in who had 4 or 5 locations. And I would say, good, they're going to try and learn from these guys. And those people would be getting in trouble. Like they'd be getting yelled at. And it's like, wow, if affiliation is your product, then this is your best customer. And you're like chasing them out of here with a stick. So, it wasn't just an accident. That was kind of a top-down message that you don't talk about business, and that lack of connection, I think, probably set people back quite a bit.
I think that, like, I remember a bunch of just kind of anecdotal stories of people that started their gyms. And I think there was also this like romanticism of like always starting with like, yeah, I just had a bucket in the middle of the room where people can put in whatever they wanted to pay. Like there was always this like, you got in for the right reasons and you were making it super accessible. And it was this thing where, you were kind of taking money like, and I think a lot of people were inspired by that. They were inspired by this idea of like spreading, the good word of CrossFit and this methodology that we all know is so powerful, and making it as accessible for as many people as possible. And yeah, I agree. It's gotten us to kind of where we're at now, which is unfortunate.
Well, Greg's premise was always that like the cream is going to rise to the top, and everything's about libertarianism. Problem is, if you're not connecting all the gyms in any way and you're not sharing data, then you don't learn anything as you go on, and like the cream can't rise to the top. And so, when I proposed just to HQ in 2017, just collecting data and sharing it with everybody, their response was, that's a great idea and we're never going to do it. But at the time, even then, I think that they had at least 5,000 gyms fail, and we had never heard about those gyms. You didn't learn anything from it, and so when we started, that's all we were, was just sharing data and knowledge, and we keep publishing every day to try and keep doing that, connecting gyms so that you can learn from the mistakes of others.
Well, I think when you refer to mentorship group, that really is what I'm thinking, is you produce, if I'm not mistaken, the most comprehensive analysis of boutique brick and mortar gyms out of anybody in the industry. And, it's pretty fascinating, the data you're collecting, because, I think for a lot of years, like we've talked about, it wasn't necessarily customary to talk about business operations. And I think in the beginning, people would talk about how many members they have, but just because you have a lot of members doesn't mean you're running a profitable, successful, sustainable business. And, you do all this data, and out of all the data, I think one of the struggles that I have, and Chris, what do you think about this, is that on average, if the average CrossFit gym owner is making, let's just say, $30,000 a year, is that an appropriate analysis? Would you say 30 to 40,000 a year? Is that an appropriate?
If you took a mean average, it would be even less than that. We look at median, and so it's like 41,000 or something, but that number is skewed because you've got like this top 10% who are doing pretty well, and then you've got this top 20 or the bottom 20% who are making $0. So 41% median, but the mean is like under 30,000.
And I think you said on the Saban podcast that that number also doesn't take into account whether some might be paying themselves or not, right?
That's true too. Yeah. And so exactly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a really interesting thing, because I've had conversations with gym owners all the time and say, hey, how is your gym performing? And say, oh, well, we profited 40 grand this year. I say, okay, so what was that inclusive of you paying yourself a salary to operate it or not? And they say, oh, no. And I think that's a misconception that, if you stepped away from the business, someone would have to operate it. And so how much would it cost to operate the business? Well, then in that case, you're probably losing money if you actually look at the amount of hours that you put in and what you actually, took away from the business. And so I guess my question is, there's like this ripple down effect. And if a gym owner is making on average 40,000, how much can they afford to pay their coaches? And how do we make it a sustainable career for coaches if they're getting paid no money to coach or $15 to $25? Like, I don't know exactly what the question is, but that's where I struggle with, is if the gym owner's not making money and the business isn't profitable, then how do they pay their coaches more? But if they don't pay their coaches more, they're not going to get top tier talent. And it's just like this cyclical effect where, someone comes in and to experience your gym, they have a poor experience because the coach is just someone who's actually an accountant, but just stepping in for the owner because he wanted to go away for the weekend. And now that bad experience leads to the business not thriving. So where do you start with all of that?
It's a catch-22 for sure. So, I mean, there is a case for part-time coaches. Sally, who runs a 6 a.m. group at my gym twice a week, is incredible, and she doesn't want to do it full-time. But more and more, like as the CrossFit community grows, it's becoming more and more critical to have like the best coaches. You can't just be the only coaches anymore. And so that means making careers. And what we say to affiliates is like, you need to be making $100,000 a year, like net owner benefit take home, before you put anybody else on a salary, because this business was originally set up as an owner operator business. And if you can't prove its validity by paying yourself, and it's hard to convince somebody else to take a gamble on making you their career.
Yeah.
I like that too. Go ahead. Yep.
Is there a world where, gyms can be as successful as they should be, and there not have to be a trajectory for career coaches? It's just being clearly outlined in the beginning that, hey, this is a 5-year shelf life for a coach. And, it's going to be a stepping stone that teaches you a bunch of, professional skills that you can take on to wherever is next. But I'm wondering if setting the expectation from the beginning that this is, for a lot of people, a 3 to 5 year portion of their life where, they're kind of figuring some stuff out, and just leading with that and giving them the best tools to, progress and make the most of that time frame, but not trying to because I think where a lot of the problems arise is that there's this kind of like gap between what's ideal and what's realistic. So I'm wondering if, you've ever had this conversation with any of the gyms that you work with, or if this is potentially a future where, it's just understood that the role of a coach, if you don't have any interest in, taking on sales for the organization or whatever, is something that has a shelf life, and that's perfectly okay for the business and the coach. But then, putting, systems in place and expectations in place to at least get the most out of those 3 or 5 years, and not get that kind of like diminishing, fizzling out, where the last year of that is just kind of frustrating for both parties. And like, you're kind of one step in, one step out, and maybe that's, putting a contract in place where like, hey, you're going to be a coach for 5 years, or just setting the expectation in the beginning.
That's a great one, Gabe. I would actually love to track some data on how long a coach really does stay around. And then maybe you could work backward from that. I mean, the generation, like my kids' generation, they're teenagers, they expect to have 4 or 5 careers before they're 60. And part of that expectation is like, the first career is where I'm going to learn all the skills, the meta skills, like public speaking and sales, and that are going to help me get the bigger careers later. Like my generation never had that. And I think what you've just done there is really frame coaching as like that incredible opportunity that's better than university, that will set them up for huge success later on, man. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've been really big on lately, and I forgot where I read this, but I love this idea, is like, if you can get paid to learn, it's so much better than paying to learn, right? Like you can get into $40,000 a year in debt to learn from university, or, we always not complain, but there's a lot of negativity around the like, oh, coaches are only making $25 an hour, but you can get paid $25 an hour and learn all the skills that you just mentioned, which is a much better deal if you think about it than, going to traditional college and, getting into a bunch of debt to possibly learn, skills that are even, less useful that what you could learn by, learning how to be on time and be professional, have responsibility, so on and so forth, speak in front of a group, sell personal training. Like those things translate incredibly to so many other things you can do. Yeah.
Wow, Gabe, do you want to be my recruiter? That's profound.
Hey, he's with us. He's with us. All right.
That was awesome.
I love it.
Hey, Chris, I wanted to ask you. So, I do want to ask you about your kids in a minute about like Well, let me ask you now. So, how many children do you have, Chris?
2, 18 and 15.
When it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to business, I'm of the premise. So my daughter is about to be 12. My son is about to be 9. And I try and pull them into a lot of business conversations just because it just happens to be that way sometimes. Like I'm at the house, we're having a conversation, and then I'll pull them in. I'll be like, hey, this is what's going on at the company. This is what we're going through. Or maybe we're in the car and they're listening. And I like to have them feel like they're a part of the journey of our business. Not like everything, of course, but I don't want them to feel like, oh, dad's at work and I know nothing about what, the gym does, right? How do you balance, and what does it look like for the future? You have an entrepreneurial spirit. You have obviously your mentorship program. You have the storage units, which I think is great. I'd love to talk about that later. But
boring business, yeah.
Yeah, storage unit business. Excuse me. But
boring business. That's what I said. We'll talk. Oh, about
boring business. Yeah. But when it comes to like your children, I'm wondering like, how have you pulled them into your businesses, and what does that look like for the future in regards to like education? Like, what are you doing that's maybe of the norm or maybe not of the norm, right? I'm just curious.
Well, so I thought these kids are going to see how amazing entrepreneurship is, and that's all they're going to want to do. And that is not what they want to do. They, like my daughter's in biology right now. And so at first I was frustrated, it's like disappointing that they don't want to follow in your footsteps. And then you realize like, I didn't want to follow in my parents' footsteps either. I wanted to do the opposite of whatever they told me. And if this is how they're going to rebel by getting a degree in biology, I'll take it,
Exactly.
So, yeah. No, I mean, the way that I've come to realize it is like, I want to be financially successful so that I can give them the option to pursue whatever they want to do in their life. And, that's basically what they're doing. They're following different paths right now and saying, I want to do this or that. And they're just free to try it. And I think like, probably that's the best thing that I can do for them.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my goals, I think as a gym owner, and I think that one way that we can start having a conversation about demystifying or breaking down this idea that money's bad is I've been putting a lot of thought in this process. Like you described it. How do you describe money and success when opening a gym? You described it on the Savant podcast really well about what success is for a gym owner. It was two factors. Do you remember what you said maybe?
Well, I mean, I define wealth as like freedom of finance and time, but the way that a gym owner might define success is like the ability to feed their family and keep their gym going for 30 years. But I don't know. That's what it was. Have been what I said. Okay.
That's what it was. And it really just resonated with me because the ability to feed your family, right, and keep it going for 30 years. I think that touches so many factors for me because I think about all the time, if you don't make, you can't give. And if you don't make as a successful gym owner, you can't give to your coaches, you can't give to your members, you can't give to philanthropic efforts you care about, and you can't give to your family. And I think that this sustainability piece, the 30 years, just really hit home for me too, because I'm not trying to do this for a day, a month, a year. I'm trying to do this, I'm on year 15 now. I want to do this for another 30 years, right? And unless we build a sustainable business, we can't get there. And so one part of sustainability from a leadership perspective is delegation. And so I'm curious, when you open a business, oftentimes you're wearing a lot of hats, and you're the janitor, the accountant, the coach, the whatever. Now, I think the industry's evolved with the, likes of Orange Theory and F45, et cetera, where we need to step our game up, where back in the day, maybe we were able to get away with a little bit more, which I'd love to talk about. But in regards to delegation, what do you think is the first thing that a gym owner should start delegating to scale themselves better? Where do they start?
It's usually like
programming.
Programming. Yeah. Buy your programming. That actually came up on a group call that I was doing yesterday. That was like their first step is buy programming, and they're right. So what you're trying to do though is you're trying to buy time. And for me, that was I was working with my first mentor, Dennis, and he said, you got to hire a cleaner. And I said, I don't have any money. And he's like, but you don't have any time, and time is more expensive than money. So you hire a cleaner for 3 nights a week. And so we hired this guy named Sean. And while Sean would mop at 9 p.m., I would sit at my desk and I would do one thing to grow the business. And at first that was emailing my email list. And then we started to make a little bit more money. And I said, oh, hang on, this is working. And then I think the next step for us was hiring a 6 a.m. coach. So I would still come to the gym at 6 a.m. and Charity would be running her group, and they loved her way more than they loved me at 6 a.m. And I would be like running reports or whatever, but doing one thing to grow my business every day. And that's really like the habit that built Catalyst, built Ignite, which I later sold, built Spark, which I later sold, and has built Two Brain Business now, is do one thing to grow my business every day before I do anything else. And that's really just because I buy myself the time to do that.
I love that one-to-one replacement of the time, because I think that, where a lot of people struggle is like, okay, I'm going to free up that time. But if they don't immediately replace it with something else, then it does feel like, well, now I'm just spending money on something I could have been doing. But that one-to-one replacement of, I'm literally taking that hour. I'm still going to be in the gym where I was going to be coaching that class, but now I'm making sure that I'm using those 60 minutes for something to grow the business. I think that's a great, very tactical thing that gym owners can do, or any entrepreneur for that matter.
So eventually you run out of stuff to delegate, right? So eventually you wind up working. But in my experience, like that's the best place to start, because you can actually see the ROI on the investment that you're making in your staff. And then, as you get to the more important roles, the places where it's harder to replace yourself, you've got more time to devote to training those people. Like the big mistake that I see a lot of gym owners make is they're like, I need help, I'm overwhelmed, I'm going to hire a coach. But the coach isn't as good as you. You micromanage them. You look over their shoulder all the time. I mean, I know you guys have a great training program, but most don't. And you're unhappy with them, and you're like, I can't take it anymore. I give up. I'm going to do it all myself. Where really you should start by hiring like a cleaner, an admin, and what we call client success, just somebody that's going to remember people's birthdays and social media.
On that note, obviously, this is a pitch for the NCFIT collective, but I do think if you're a gym owner, I put up the post the other day and I just said, hey, if you're a gym owner and you're not outsourcing your programming, I really think that you're spinning your wheels, you're wasting your time. And look, obviously I think ours is the best, but there's other providers. But I just think that if you're spending, 3 to 10 hours a week, if you're only spending an hour or two a week programming, you're probably not putting out the best product. If you're spending 10 hours a week, you could be using that such a better way if you're outsourcing to experts that spend all their, that have a team doing it. But enough of a pitch for the collective, although I do think it's the best. But I want to get back to the sales process. So from all of your mentorship that you've done, I mean, you've worked with hundreds and hundreds of gyms. I mean, what sales process have you found in general? Because one of the struggles that I find with CrossFit gyms is they don't answer their phones, they don't answer their emails. And I don't understand how this became normalized. Like, I just don't get it. Like, how is it normal that I was in Southern California 2 weeks ago? I called 6 gyms. None of them answered their phone. And how is that normal? And so what type of systems have you seen to help an owner operator break through that struggle? Because I think what happens is they're coaching most of the day. They're busy. They don't prioritize it. And then they get to it maybe the next day or the day after because they're coaching when those emails come in. What systems have you seen kind of help them get from okay to better?
Well, the first is freeing up the time to do that stuff, because that's not comfortable for most people, returning calls or emails. And so that's what gets pushed off because you're so busy, right? So that's the first thing. And then we teach a very basic form of a motivational interview called a no sweat intro. About 15, 20 minutes. You basically ask 3 questions about a person's motivation, and then you prescribe them a course of action. And that happens before you do a gym tour or anything else. Like in Sault Ste. Marie, where I live, nobody, not anymore. In 2008, people just wanted to try CrossFit. That you don't see that anymore. So we're back to the no sweat intro now. But the best systems that we see now, like the best software out there for gyms, is like CRMs. So what we teach people is you learn how to do a no sweat intro. You learn how to nurture leads, and like here's some scripts until you're comfortable with it. And then here's how to track whether you're actually getting leads from your website. And then we have partners like Gym Lead Machine that actually just do this for people. They build the website, they get people to book appointments. And then my staff, they all have like Gym Lead Machine on their phones, and they all just like jump into text conversations that the software starts for them. Does that answer the question?
That's a good place to start. I mean, I think Gabe and I want to dive into this more. Like, cool. This is fresh on our mind too, because we're looking at changing the way. I mean, I don't know. Gabe could talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to figure out our kind of own new system. We've tried a whole bunch of different things, but I think that a part of it, Chris, or at least that I've noticed is, like you said, it's not a priority. And one thing that was really eye-opening to me. So my wife and I dropped in at an Orange Theory in Austin a couple months back. I think it was during the Rogue Invitational, just to kind of like see what else is out there, see what the experience. And they did many things really, really well. But one thing that like really caught my eye and was like was a really big moment for me was the manager of the location that we went to go try. She jumped in to class with us. It was like a Sunday morning, so there weren't that many people. So she jumped into class, but she was doing her workout and she brought in the phone and had it next to her. And twice during her workout, the phone rang and she immediately ran outside to pick up the phone. And I just thought it was such an eye-opening moment to me, to like, the culture there is that phone needs to get answered when it rings. And I know that, coaches or gym owners might be busy coaching, and that's not a time where you can pick up the phone, but you show me a gym owner in our space that will literally interrupt their workout to answer the phone. And that's probably a gym that's doing pretty well. So it was just like a really eye-opening moment of how high on the priority list it is for, a gym like Orange Theory or a franchise like Orange Theory to really get to these leads, because they know how important it is to answer on time, right? The difference between answering when they actually call and even getting back to them 5 minutes later could be the difference between them coming in or not, because a lot of people, they didn't get an answer, they're going to go to the next gym, because many times it's an emotional decision for them to finally want to try a gym, and they're trying to figure out something now, or they're just going to go about their life and now it's something that they're not going to think about for another month. So that timeliness is so important. So that was a real eye-opening experience for me. Was just, it's definitely not a priority in our space. I know that no one has, their gym number set up to their cell phone and has it right next to them while they're doing, their Fight Gone Bad repeat. And they're not going to stop on round 2 to pick up the phone. They're not, the score is too important. And I think that, that those priorities need to be revisited for some gym owners if they really want to move the needle on their business, but it's just not there.
I was a really horrible treadmill salesperson, but that's one lesson I learned back then. When I was trying to build a personal training business in '98, I was selling treadmills. And that's one thing that the owner told me is like, you always answer the phone. And she said, Chris, every phone call is a $10,000 phone call. So, and if you don't answer, somebody else is getting the $10,000. So yeah, that's why,
And on that note, I want to kind of follow up on the Orange Theory F45.
Yeah.
I feel like when I opened up CrossFit Santa Clara, that was in 2008. A lot has changed since 2008. And I think a lot of it is due to CrossFit. I think what happened is you had the conventional gym market, which was lower complexity, selectoralized type equipment, lower community, lower coaching, right? And then you had CrossFit, which was high complexity, high coaching, higher cost, But there was this gap in the middle that I think occurred. And that gap, I think, has been filled by Orange Theory and F45, where it's not as complex as CrossFit in general. Maybe people would argue not as much focus on coaching as much. It's more of an atmosphere they generate, but it's much more than a conventional gym in terms of complexity and in terms of coaching, right? And there's like right in the middle. But what they did, I think, a really good job of is they systemized things, right? They had a franchise model instead of license. And so I'm curious, how much do you think it's of detriment or good of CrossFit to be a license instead of a franchise? And where do you think it's going to go in the future with leadership like Dawn in terms of creating consistency across one experience to the other? Because my argument would be if someone goes in and tries CrossFit and has a terrible experience, they're going to tell 3 friends how bad it is. But if we could raise the bar a little bit, it's going to help the overall ecosystem. So I guess my question is, what do you think is the long-term strategy from an affiliate model to create sustainability so that the overall ecosystem starts to rise up? What do you think HQ should be doing in that sense?
That's a tough one. And I have talked to Don about this. And, one of the things is that like most CrossFit affiliate owners are first-time entrepreneurs. And so they're struggling with like, entry-level entrepreneurship stuff, right? They're fighting to make 50 grand a year. The more successful entrepreneurs are going straight to Orange Theory, F45, because they're like, okay, all I have to do is invest money. And that means I don't have to spend the next 10 years struggling to make 50 grand. Done. But what's going to happen is like, as more of this data gets out and best practices result from that, and there's a more, proven approach to doing things, you'll approach that kind of model. And what will happen then is you'll start seeing people who are successful CrossFit affiliates asking themselves like, am I really interested in buying myself a job here? Or now that I'm making some money, am I better off to just buy an Orange Theory? And so that's like a risk. But what CrossFit is trying to balance right now, and I don't have a really good answer for it, is like, how much do we systemize things to raise the entire ecosystem versus pleasing the OGs who just want to keep figuring it out for themselves, and the tools, not rules, ethos. I don't know. I think it's a step in the right direction, but honestly, some of the conversations that we've had from HQ to me suggest that they want to formalize like a lot more, or internalize a lot more business knowledge.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing though. I'm excited that CrossFit wants to talk about business because I think it's going to help the overall ecosystem like we've spoken about. And I think that, that's where we need to go to be the next 30 years, like you're talking about, Chris, because otherwise, the inconsistencies, I think, are just going to keep CrossFit where it's at. I think that, one of the things that I've seen, and I don't know your opinion on this, what percentage of owners, maybe not in your mentorship group, but in general, do you think have another source of income from the gym? Like it's not their full-time gig in the gym as an owner. What percent do you think of CrossFit affiliates are owned by someone who is not their sole source of income?
I think my perception here is probably skewed, but I would guess 20. However, if you count spouses, that number is going to more than double. I have the gym, but it's because my wife has this amazing job. That's why I'm allowed to only make 20 grand a year. We see that a lot. And honestly, that was what prompted me to open a gym. Robin was killing it at her job, and I was making $19,000 a year as a personal trainer. And so that's why I had permission to take the risk. And then when she decided that motherhood was going to be her career, I was like, oh crap, like we're going down 75% of our income here. I better open a gym.
Right.
That's how you become a millionaire. Yeah. Yeah. So go ahead, Gabe. Did you have...
No. That was just...
It's hard to say.
Yeah, so if you are interested in opening up a gym, what do you think you should be doing today to prepare yourself? So an example that I give gym owners is, go join a gym, go learn whatever you can from that owner, take what you like, take it with you, take what you don't like and leave it behind, but go to school now before you sign that lease. And I think a lot of people would think like, oh, get your level 1, get your level 2, get your level 3. I think those are obviously prerequisites if you're looking to coach. But if you're passionate about CrossFit, it changed your life. You're currently in a maybe a career path that you're not as passionate about. What is the deciding factor for someone to pursue fitness, and what should they be aware of on the pros and on the cons? Where should they start?
Well, I think they start by getting a job as a coach, right? Like narrowing that gap between what they're currently earning and what they want to earn. Because the reality is that in your first year, you're going to be doing a lot of coaching. The second thing that I would say is like have a model to copy. And this is where I got in trouble was I was just like, I'm going to make it all up. I'm going to figure it out all out on my own. And then in 2008-ish, when I finally realized like, oh my, I'm not going to figure this out, I started looking around for somebody who had actually done well in fitness and was able to retire. And I couldn't find anybody. And so now, like, a big part of the reason that we publish this stuff for free is like just to give people a model to start with. So the model that we give new gym owners is like start by getting 50 clients. 50 clients should be enough to pay your expenses, and it should also be enough to pay you at least $1,000 a month, like net. Like that's the minimum. And so you use that number to set your rates, you use that number to choose your space, to buy your equipment, etc. And then we say, now you're going to go for 150. And when you get to 150, you should be taking home 100,000 a year. You should have a full-time employee and at least a half-time employee. And after that model, after you hit 150, you've got all of the framework you can use to keep growing, like as almost as big as you want to. And so like the thing is though, any model that is proven to work is a good model to copy. The only mistake you can make is like, I'm going to figure this shit out on my own, because that's just not going to happen.
Right. And when you talk about 50, 150 members, your, average client value is something that, you've been about for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering from a nutrition perspective. So there's two things I want to dive into that we're currently pursuing. And we're changing our sales process because of it. I mean, Gabe, do you want to kind of talk about what we have done and where we're thinking about going, and maybe see what Chris is like? Because we're right in the middle of this. I mean, I think this is a good conversation to have, right? We've been doing the 3 for 30, but now we're maybe pivoting, right?
Yeah. So Jason loves talking about things way, way, way too early. So I'm a little, as he starts like, oh, it's a great time to talk about this. I'm like, is it a great time to talk about it? But I think in general terms, we've gone from trying to get as many people in the door by just, 3 classes, $30, like really easy. Let's capture payment information. Let's get you in the door. Let's have our coaches like knock your socks off. And I think that this was, in part from coming back from COVID and having relatively small classes, and also really trusting that our coaches could do a really good job at, having a new person among a group of 10 experienced people and be able to really put on a high quality experience that doesn't at the detriment of the group or the person that's brand new. And, it's served us well. It's definitely gotten people in the door, and we've had a lot of success there. One thing that we've struggled with is really trying to have the coaches take on a little bit of a sales role. I think that we've tried to marry those two with, not the best results. So I think now we want to move more towards an approach where we are having a no sweat intro type of meeting that someone is responsible for, and that's their sole responsibility. And we have a system, we have a script, we have follow-ups, instead of just, hey, come in, our coaches are going to wow you and you're going to sign up because of that. And a big part of why we're doing that as well is because we're adding nutrition coaching to what we offer at NCFIT. And we want to make sure that people that do come on are ideally doing what we think is the ideal recipe for results, which is signing up for both fitness and nutrition. And because that's going to be a little bit more of an investment, we want to make sure that someone's having that conversation with you, and you're not kind of like given a price sheet and left to your choosing what you're doing. So that's kind of the transition that we're in now. But it comes with the biggest challenge, it being like a very cultural change in how our coaches have viewed sales, how everyone from Jason has viewed selling and selling something that's also to be perfectly honest, not really going to be cheap. The value is there. We know how big of a piece nutrition is to supplement, what we do very well already, which is fitness. And we're going to be charging accordingly, but it's definitely something that's very different from what we've done in the past. So that's currently the transition we're in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so for me, if you go to an art gallery, like the painting is really important, but it's really the frame that matters the most. And so like when somebody comes in, we used to just like, hey, come in, try a free class. Or we had we copied Nikki Violetti's on-ramp program back in whatever that was, 2010. And what would happen is like 2/3 of the people would walk away from that and be like, wow, this is way too hard. CrossFit's not for me. And so we went back to the consultative process that we were using for personal training clients and saying like, where are you starting from? What do you want? Let's break it down. Here's our first trial. And so we're going to do this plan for 90 days. And then we're going to get back together, measure your results. And then the second plan is going to be even better. And so what we found there is like now the retention through the first 90 days is almost 100% because people expect to have their prescription upgraded based on their results after 90 days. But that's really, it's all about the frame. And like what I learned from some of our clients who've been around for over 15 years is like, as long as they see that you have a plan, they'll go along with whatever the plan is. But if they see, oh, Chris doesn't have a plan, we're just doing more classes, they'll start to formulate a plan on their own. And that quickly means that they'll like leave to try something different or buy a whole bunch of home equipment and try and just throw it down in the garage by themselves, in our experience.
Chris, in your experience with all the gyms you work with, and which is one of the reasons why I love what you're doing, because you're not talking about you're talking about the sum of, like, you're not talking like, some of our members want a 5 a.m. class. Well, like is that like just two, like, and is that two gyms that are successful, or is that the sum of, like, in general, we're finding that the sum of our gyms, right? Like hundreds of them find that, my question is pricing on the website or off the website in general, what have you seen better success with?
Well, our recommendation changes depending on where you are in your entrepreneurial journey. And that's why I wrote Founder, Farmer, Tinker, Thief, because the right answer is different. So pricing on my website, absolutely. Because if pricing is going to be a barrier to you, let's wait until it's not. And then you'll be back. It might take a couple of years. If somebody has a newer gym though, and they're not used to doing this consultative process, they need some reps. And so you don't put the pricing on the website, you request the pricing. When somebody says, how much do you cost? You say, there's a lot of options. We tailor our program to every single person. I'd love to give you a free 30-minute consultation to talk about your goals and see if we're a good fit. And then from there, you make a prescription, and you're going to have a pricing binder in front of you when they come in, and you're going to flip to the right page depending on what it takes to get them to their goals. And you're going to say, that's the one for you. And if they say, I can't afford that, you say, what's your budget? And then you roll back a few pages or whatever. But I put prices on my website at Catalyst because it's like, if somebody is price sensitive, I don't need more clients. And so it's like, if that's what's going to be their filter, let's just not waste each other's time, But again, like, my gym's been around forever. Most new gyms should probably not put the prices on their website and get people in a conversation.
You've bought and sold how many gyms?
I've never bought a gym, but a couple of times I've launched like a satellite gym and then sold it. And I've done that with other companies too.
Okay. So when it comes to CrossFit gyms, and I know this is a question I get a lot, so I thought I'd ask you in your opinion. I love having you here because I just think you have a wealth of knowledge across many locations.
Thanks,
when it comes to a gym, how much is a CrossFit gym worth?
So we actually are writing a blog series on this today, so it's top of mind. And the answer is there's a lot of things that you can do to increase the value of that gym. So the figure it out on your sticky notes answer is like 3 times your best, like your 3 best years of profit plus the value of your equipment. That's it. Now, if you have debt, of course, you have to subtract that. And in some cases, like a long-term expensive lease might be a liability too, So you can get really complicated with it. But in general, like if you're making $100,000 a year from your gym and you have some equipment that's not completely worn out, let's call that $30,000 worth of equipment, then your gym is worth $330,000. If you want, sorry.
When you say 100,000, just to be clear on that, if I am the owner operator and my take home is 100,000,
yeah,
is this I'm making 100 plus the gym is profiting 100,000?
That's a great differentiation, Jay. And I've always just said, if you're making $100,000 and somebody else is willing to step in as the owner of a CrossFit gym and be the head coach, then it's worth $100,000 a year to them for 3 years. But you're right. That's not what it's worth to like an investor that wants to buy an asset that runs itself. No way. Like, why would they buy themselves a job, right?
Okay. So if it's an owner operator selling to an owner operator, the ideal, in general, you're thinking 3x, essentially take home income from one owner operator plus the cost of equipment, unless they have a substantial lease issue, meaning maybe the zoning isn't right and they're in a building that's not even supposed to be a gym, or maybe they only have 6 months left on the lease and because or maybe they have too long of a lease and it's a liability, or there's factors that need to be considered is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Okay. And there's things that you can do to boost that value too. Like if you put members on contracts, it will boost that value. I don't do it. I don't like contracts, but if I'm a bad example here. If somebody else was trying to sell their gym and maximize like sale value, that's one thing you could do is get all your members to commit for a year, because now you've got like guaranteed future revenues.
Yeah, we had contracts for a while and we actually removed them because I felt the same way. I just felt like if someone wasn't happy with our service, they should be able to exit from it. And so we never held anybody to contracts. So why have them in the first place? Is kind of
exactly. And I think a lot of gym owners are in the same boat. It's like, why make a rule you're not going to enforce? You're just going to create stress for yourself, Yeah.
When it comes to membership types, we have a month to month and we have a drop in.
Yeah.
How many membership types is too many?
Well, the answer is, according to actual research, is like you can only give people 3 options at a time, maximum. If you give them 4 options, they won't make a choice. And Asgard was the researcher. Anyway, she published a whole book on it called like the paralysis of choice or something. Huh. So I can send it to you or list it for your show notes later. But that doesn't mean you can only have 3 options, though. It means you can only present 3 at a time. So it's like what we'll do in our sales binder is we'll have, here's the personal training option, here's the group option, here's kind of like the high ticket option which is like personal training and nutrition. And so, okay, what do you need? Well, okay, I think you need fitness and you need nutrition. Would you prefer to do your fitness in a small group setting or one-on-one with me? Okay. So we narrow the choices down and then I'll present them with 3 choices. But so for me, I guess we would probably have like 9 different membership options unless you count kids.
Okay. That's Gabe, that's good for us to kind of the paralysis of choice, right? That's the book. Do you think that's the book?
It's called Shaina Iyengar is the author. And the cover, I can picture it. It's purple and it has like 3 jars of jam on it. I can send it to you after. Shaina Iyengar is the author.
No, that's really good. I think that's something we're working on too through our sales process. Is we've talked about like what good, better, best options.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So I want to ask class ratio in general. I think there's this law of diminishing returns a little bit. So if you say, hey, I'm going to have a coach, we're going to pay him a premium, and then we're going to have a 10 class cap. Well, if we're paying a coach a premium, we might not even be profitable unless we have at least 6 people in the class or 10 people or whatever it is. But if you go more than 20, or let's just say you go 30, yeah, you have a really profitable class, but I think that their experience might not be as good. And so in general, what do you find is a good class to coach ratio when you're kind of debating experience to profitability, to class size, to space? And then also, what is a good typical space for a gym if they're looking to start a new location? How many square feet do you think is ideal? And what do you think is a good class capacity based on, your network?
Well, so from our data set, what we find, we approach it from like, what is the best client experience? And you can measure client experience by a few different metrics. One is adherence. So what makes a client come more often or show up for the number that they've bought? So if they bought like 12 sessions a month, how do you make sure they show up for all 12? That's adherence. And if you look at class size, what you'll see is that adherence is strongest when you have an average class size between 7 and 12. So if your class is smaller than that, they're not really getting much retention benefit from that. And if your class is bigger than 13, like adherence starts to drop off again. Like nobody will miss me if I'm gone, right? And then you work backward from that. So you say, okay, now when we're setting our prices, if our average class size is going to be 7 to 13 and my coach needs to make $30 a class, what do my membership prices actually have to be? And that's how you determine your rates, basically. One real benefit of all the lockdowns for us, and I know there weren't many, but one was that the government just decided there's going to be a class cap in all fitness facilities of 10. So that brought our class cap from 16 down to 10. And I actually like it better. And so after almost 2 years off from my gym, I started going to classes again. And on Monday, class is over. And I'm like, all right, peace, guys. See you later. And they're like, the other clients are like, Coop, wait a minute. You got to clean up your stuff, man. Like, go get the spray bottle and a towel and come back here and wipe off that chalk that you put on the floor. And I love it. It's so like 10 is good for us, but the data says 7 to 13.
Okay. Just for clarity's sake, for us at NCFIT, we do 18 in like what do they, Gabe? Each room, our big rooms are like 3,000 square feet each, 4,000.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
3,000. So we do 18.
That sounds right.
Yeah. 18 in our back room. So we have close to 100 classes at Mountain View. We have a lot of classes there because we have a 2-room model. We have a 2-room model at Campbell as well. I wanted to ask you, coming out of COVID, we started taking class reservations and putting 10-minute gaps in between classes. And at first I was pretty resistant to the 10-minute gap because it's kind of weird. It's like, you're going to come in for a 3:30 and then you're going to come in for a 4:40 and then you're going to come in for a 5:50. Then you're going to come in for a 7, right? What do you think about class caps in terms of reservations? What have you seen? And then gaps. Is there data on that you've acquired from your mentorship program?
Not gaps, no. We've never asked that question. That's a great one, though. You guys have already come up with some amazing things that are going to go in the next state of the industry data set, though. Thank you. And I forgot to answer your previous question. If you look at the data, the most profitable gyms average about 4,300 square feet. I think, though, there's a caveat there, and that is that you're talking about like class sizes of an average of like 8-9 people, one coach, right? They're not operating at scale like you guys are. And I think that's the big differentiator. And that's also like what's hidden in the data is the outliers. So, as far as the gaps, I don't have any data on that, but I can imagine as a coach, like that might make things easier.
Yeah, I mean, just for any gym owner listening, for us, I think it's been incredibly beneficial for a few main reasons. Number one, it allows the coach to engage with the clients a little bit more, the members, and not make them feel like they're getting forced out of the gym because you have the other class just waiting there. So that's one, right? Like it allows the current class to kind of like take their time, whatever. The next class comes in. It's like this like really beautiful like kind of sequence versus like one class rushes out, another class is rushing in. And then also it helps with parking lot congestion because you'll have one class leaving as the other class parks. So I think that's been helpful. And then thirdly, which I know Gabe, it might be a little bit different now, is it allows the coach to engage with people who are coming in for their first experience better before they leave. So that's been helpful.
Yeah, that's great. And if the CrossFit Open workouts are complicated and require a lot of time to explain, you've got a little buffer.
Yeah, you have a little buffer. And so those have been really helpful for us. I think, we're learning a lot as we go. Like, for example, we have class reservations and we started off with a $5 late cancellation fee. We just bumped that to $20 because people didn't care about the $5. So they were reserving classes left and right and taking up other people's spots. And so we had to raise that up, and it's actually worked pretty well for us. So anyway.
That's good.
Gabe, Chris he's got obviously a big background here. What else are you thinking from our business perspective? Especially, Gabe just went through I like to call it a master class in social media.
Cool.
What comes to mind from that kind of angle, Gabe? Anything come to mind for Chris that you think other gym owners might be able to hear and listen?
Well, I mean, not specifically to that, but I had a selfish question because, Chris, I know that you write a lot of copy, and I know that you're a big writer. I write our newsletters and a lot of the copy ourselves. I'm just curious what your process is like for getting that much stuff out. Anything that you've learned has worked really well for you on that end?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm asking myself when I get up is like, how can I serve? And so that means I'll get questions from people all the time. So we have an alumni of 1,700 gyms. We have a public Facebook group at gymownersunited.com of like 7,000 gyms in there. Inside Two Brain, there's 827 gyms. And so the first thing I'll do is look for really good questions that I missed the evening before. And I'll just start writing the answer I think the answer or looking up the data and saying, here's what the data supports. Sometimes my sales team at Two Brain will say, you know what, this has come up a lot in the last couple of weeks. And so Matt Temby, who's the head of our sales team, he'll be like, hey, Coop, here's a really common question in the last 2 weeks. And that's where our best material comes from. I would say maybe 2/3 of the stuff that I write is never published though, Gabe. The biggest scoop of my career was when CrossFit decided that they didn't want to have a media team, started firing everybody, and I just hired them all. So I've got Mike Morgan in my back pocket. He would probably guess the show too if you have specific questions about media and publication. He makes me look really good.
Awesome.
But you don't want my drafts. They're garbage.
One of the things I do want to touch on before we, kind of switch gears or whatnot. I know you have a lot of things going on today. I get this question a lot. It's like, our gym is not doing extremely well. We're not getting new members in the door. We want to utilize Facebook and Instagram ads. That's immediately where they gravitate towards. What do you think gym owners should be doing before they even think about Facebook and Instagram ads? And or is there a better ad model that they're not considering, like Google AdWords, website optimization, SEO? I guess it's kind of like a double question. What should they be doing before they spend any money on ads? And then if they are going to spend money, what should they be doing?
Well, when people come into our program, we want them to start making money right away so that they can just cover the cost of the investment as fast as possible. And so we don't teach Facebook ads right out of the gate. What we teach is how to get referrals. And so while there is some really easy organic wins that you can do, referrals are really where it's at. And the beautiful part about putting referrals at the base of your marketing pyramid is that every person that comes in through Facebook later on turns into 2 or 3 people if you've got a referral process. And so that actually is, we make that part of our organic goal review process. I said before that the client's best program is the second program because it's more focused on their results and their outcomes. And during that second meeting, when you're doing a goal review, if they say, yeah, I'm doing amazing, I can't believe the results I've had in 90 days, that's when you pull out your phone, you ask them to tell their story, you make them famous. And then you say, hey, Gabe, I know your spouse is a really big basketball player. Do you want to bring her in and do a 2-on-1 personal training session with me? And I'll give her some basketball specific exercises or whatever that is, right? For us right now in Canada, it's, hey, I know you work in an accounting office. It's tax season. I know it's super stressful. I'd love to help. What if I came into your accounting office at noon and we did a lunch and learn? I talked about nutrition, relieving stress, and some stretches and stuff people could do at their desk. So you're always looking for that. We call that affinity marketing. It's like leveraging the closest relationships that the client has. And it's a real win for them because like, if I really want to make a difference in your life, I really need to influence like, what your spouse is making for dinner, the kind of environment that you have at work, that kind of thing.
And then after they do that, then would they like, is there ever a time to do paid ads?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, we teach 4 funnels. Referrals is the first one, like organic social media one. And then it's ads. The thing about organic is like you want to be good at organic social media before you get to the ads, because that's going to make every ad that you run more effective. So, every 3 or 4 days, I'll make my personal Facebook profile. And one of my mentors, Sharon Srivatsa, says like fame is the ultimate business model. Well, what happens is like when I make a post, people in my local community see it, gym owners see it, any business that I run has people who are seeing that post and they hit like, they comment on it, it brings them closer to me. And then when I actually do run an ad, they're more likely to see it and also be more engaged with it. Cause it's like, here's this thing from Chris, And so like what gym owners don't understand is like, they are small town famous. They need to be a celebrity in their own small town. And so you start with organic, you make meaningful posts. We give people samples. A great place to start is just like a milestone, right? Like today is the 20,000th day I've owned a gym or whatever. And then when we do get to paid, we teach lead ads for Facebook and Instagram. We don't teach conversion ads anymore. They just take too long. And we are really big on retargeting. So you do lead ads to get people to a form, and then that form has a pixel on it and you retarget heavily. The first time somebody sees your ad, they're probably not engaging. The 9th time they see it, they're likely to engage. The 11th time, they're a warm lead. So really lead ads and retargeting are what it's all about. Advertising marketing used to be an art, now it's a science.
Gabe, it's like he's like it's like preaching to the choir with you, I imagine, because you used to tell me seven times, right?
Yeah, 7 is a number that gets thrown around, but I mean the most important piece is that like you can't send one email, can't put one post, you can't have one call to action and expect people to convert or try and measure how effective that call to action or that piece of content was by the results of that, because no one that is coming in cold is interacting with the first thing they see. And I mean, people can probably think right now about some ad or something that they've seen like literally 10 times. It's funny. We just had our first kid. We have a 3-month-old. And the amount of things that I and my wife have purchased for this kid because they hit us with the same ad, like, and literally it wears you down. By the 12th time, you're like, all right, we do need this thing. And you end up buying it. So it's very true.
They got you, bro.
Oh, yeah. And like,
so we can use that for the power of good, right? That's all.
Right. Exactly.
And so, Chris,
hey, listen, my cat has a treadmill. Like those
your cat has a treadmill
wheels because for this exact reason. One of my kids saw this on a Facebook or an Instagram ad, and that is why there's a giant spinning wheel in my basement that my cat runs on now.
Dude,
I'll send you guys a picture later.
Yeah, send me one, dude. I got to ask you, Chris, before we close out, as a gym owner ourselves, I really feel invested in the CrossFit space, that I want to be a part of the growth and support. I believe that CrossFit needs to evolve. It needs to think more like a business and not as much like a hobby. And I know you do too. And so I'm curious, as a gym owner listening, first off, I think they should be looking at the products that we both provide, right? Your 2Brain mentorship program. Obviously, there's hundreds and hundreds of gyms there that have seen success, and they should pursue that. And they should look into it if that's. And then obviously for us, it's the session planning and programming. They should look into that. But I'm curious, like aside from those two things, on a more like grand scale, a big picture, what do you think an affiliate owner can do to support the overall ecosystem? My argument would be at a high level to treat it more like a business, less like a hobby. But that's a pretty like theoretical framework. What do you think a gym owner can do to help guide CrossFit for the next decade so it gets more people into the doors of more gyms to tell more people about how great CrossFit is, which rises the tides and get more people into their gym as a byproduct? What do you think they could be doing right now?
Be a more successful owner. if you're a more successful owner, you create a platform, and that platform is one on which other fitness professionals can build careers. When I entered the industry, the only people doing personal training were people who were waiting for their modeling job to kick in. This can be a meaningful career, but only if there are successful gyms around to support them. That platform also supports your family, which creates a multi-generational legacy of fitness and health and reduces the costs of your community. And finally, that platform creates impact. And so our mission at Catalyst is to change the lives of 7,000 people in our city, because that's 10% of our local population. And if I can change your life, make your life better, increase your longevity and your health span and lifespan, that's going to trickle over into your spouse. That's going to create a multi-generational impact on your kids, influence the people at work. And I think for us to change our community, change the trajectory of health in Canada, and also the financial trajectory of my town, the best thing that I can do is have a successful gym. And then as a fourth tier, my motto is make lots of money and give it away. And I've seen personally the impact that you can have when money is the only thing that can solve a problem. When kids need bikes, we buy 50 bikes a year for local kids. And last night we were at a meeting for a local hockey organization, and they're like, oh God, our budget's short. And we had a check in our pocket, just so here you go, you're done. And that's really the kind of thing that I think gym owners deserve to be able to do.
Dude, you are preaching. I love it, man. I feel so strongly about what
I just had an
said.
espresso. Thank you.
I feel so strongly about what you just said. And I just hope that we can continue to have more and more conversations like this, because we need to let everybody know, go out there and make as much as you can and give and support. And it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, because ultimately, again, oh man, I could talk to you for hours. We need to do this again.
Thanks,
with additional data and just keep sharing. I think for us, like I said, doing class reservations has been helpful. The 10-minute gas, we can talk more about that. I'd love to share with you what we're doing with nutrition rollout and how we're trying to get, what I'll do is maybe I'll set up a time we can talk more about some of the numbers that we're seeing and how we think nutrition could increase those numbers by, a little bit. And then once we get nutrition rolling, because I know Gabe's probably saying, dude, you're premature. I get it. We are at least trying. We're trying PT. We're trying this. We're trying different things. So when we talk about stuff to gym owners, we're not just talking hypotheticals. We're talking about, hey, we went out there, we did we took our pricing off. Or I'll give you a good example. We're retargeting now with the use of the Mark CrossFit, because we hadn't been using that for a long time. What does the data show about utilizing that versus not? And that's something we can talk about as we get more and more data around it.
I love having Gabe in the conversation. You guys are like two brain business. It's a very complimentary relationship.
Oh, dude,
it's just me trying to rein the big guy in 24/7.
Those are the best. Well, thank you guys. And, I'm going to have you guys on our podcast soon to talk about the Brain Summit. Jay, I'm so thrilled that you're coming out to speak. The past headliners were like Jocko Willink, Seth Godin, no pressure, but you're going to do better than they did.
Oh boy, dude, I was just with Jocko. That guy's very intimidating, but he was awesome, man, when I was with him. I wanted to say before we close out, just make sure, for any gym owners listening wants to be interested in what you have to offer, get more detail on it. I know you guys put out a lot of content. Where's the best place for them to go to get to start getting those 1, 10, 5, maybe even 10 ads and eventually dive deep with you guys? Where's the best place to go?
The best place is just go to gymownersunited.com. That's a free Facebook group. We keep things very bright, very positive. There's no sarcasm or negativity in there. Every single day, my mentor team of 50 mentors worldwide are in there just answering free questions and helping. And we share a lot of great step-by-step resources in there too. That's the best place to start.
Dude, love that. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate Chris for being on, Gabe, as per usual. And we'll see you guys again next week.